Hello and thank you for joining us today here at the Bramble Patch. My name is Wendy and on technical today we've got Alicia. Today I'm going to show you how to make a pillowcase. So this is the pillowcase and with this pillowcase there are no raw edges inside. So if I can just open this section up and just lift this back, you can see all the seams are enclosed. It's rather nice when we make quilts to be able to coordinate our pillowcases with them. And quite often if we go to the shops, we can't always quite find the right fabrics that tone with them. So this way you can always, if you have any leftover fabric, use that fabric to make pillowcases, or you can actually buy extra when you consider making your quilt in the first place. This one is just a pretty one. Will just be used for general use. Because it's 100% cotton, it's going to launder equally as well as any you would buy from a department store. Also, these are a really good idea if you want to make them out of Christmas fabric. They can be used for two things. You can use them as a normal pillowcase, or you can double it up and use it as a Christmas sack, which is what I've been doing for many, many years for all my children and myself and my husband as well. I find on Christmas Eve, when you used to go back and turn the sheets back ready for the children to get into bed, to put a really different pillowcase on their bed with a Christmas theme, they really settle and they really like it. So let's go ahead and work out how we actually make this pillowcase. So first of all, we need 3 fabrics. Now, I have already cut the width of the fabrics because I'm quite short of space in the room where we do the demonstrations here. So first of all, the fabric you need is the width of the bolt, okay? And the first fabric, so this is the main fabric of the pillowcase. And this is 27 inches in width. So this is, as it come off the bolt, the full width of the bolt, and we've cut 27 inches of this, okay? Then we need to decide the fabric for the actual cuff at the very, very edge. And the size of that, again, all of the fabrics we're using are off the width of the bolt, and this needs to be 9 inches in width. Now, this pattern is not my own design. It's a very, very old pattern that's been used throughout the world. And originally, this was designed, as far as I'm aware, as a charity pillowcase. So all quilters got together in the USA and Australia, New Zealand, and they started to make pillowcases for people less fortunate than themselves. So it might be for the homeless people, or for children that were orphaned or quite poorly, just to have something personal for themselves. And it went down really well, and many, many people and patchworkers got involved. And this has been going on for many, many years. So it's a really simple one to do, but a lot of thought had got into it. So this is the one, this is the fabric that would go right on the very edge, and that's called the cuff of the pillowcase. But as you saw on the other one, we have a little flange that goes across here. You can cut this the width, whatever width you want. I like to have the width of this one at 3 inches, because once it's folded in half, obviously it's going to be 1.5, and then you will lose your seam allowance as well. So again, across the full width of the bolt. So once we've got all that done, what we need to do is level the edges up, because different manufacturers, although, you know, they say a bolt is 40, 41, 42, they all do vary a little bit. Some have selvages that show. On boutiques, sometimes you don't really need to trim the edges at all. But we do need to make sure that all of the edges are the same width. So what we're going to do now is, due to the fact that a lot of people don't have the really, really big cutting boards, what I like to do is take my first piece of fabric, which is cut at 27 inches, and I'm going to fold that in half, because this makes it much, much easier for us to actually tidy the top edge up where the selvage is. because a lot of us don't have rulers that are beyond 27 inches, and we don't have the mat. And by having to move it, you might disturb it. So if we fold it on itself, making sure that the folded edge, I'm right-handed, so therefore I've got the folded edge to the left-hand side with all my surplus fabric to the right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to level that edge up on one of the lines on my cutting mat, like so. So I've got it leveled on the edge here, and I've got it leveled along the edge at the bottom as well. Now what I need to do is take the cuff, which I've already cut at 9 inches in width, and I'm going to place that, so again I've got the folded edge to the folded edge of the main body of the pillowcase, like so. Just making sure that's nice and straight. Then once again, with the last piece, with the flange, I will take that and again put that right flush on that folded edge. So all my raw edges are to the top, and this is where I want to trim it. Now, you may choose to adjust the size of your pillowcase. I've got quite large pillowcases, so large pillows, so I do make the pillowcases quite large. It is a good idea to just measure your pillow and adjust the size accordingly. If you're doing that, what you do need to realise, we're going to do French seams, so you're not going to lose 1/4 of an inch on each edge. You're going to be losing 1/2 an inch or slightly over, okay? So all I want to do is now trim the raw edge here, so I've got all of the 3 individual pieces flush exactly the same measurement. So I'm just going to take my ruler and I'm going to place it. So I've got one of the lines on my ruler, I'm going to bring that down a little bit. I've got one of the lines on my ruler straight across the bottom edge of the pillowcase. And what I'm going to do then is line the edge of the ruler on one of the lines on the cutting mat. So I've got this lined up at number 28 beautifully here, and that extends to here. And that way I can see that I'm not cutting it at any angle. All I need to do then is find my rotary cutter. When I use my rotary cutter, always make sure you're locking it when you put it down. And I like to have my fingers, always make sure they are inside the 1/2 inch line on my rotary cutter. Fingers sprayed out so you can add pressure. Nose in line with the edge of the ruler, and always, always push away from you. If you need to reposition, reposition, and push away. Then that can be discarded. Okay, so now we need to lay the fabric out to start to layer it up to enclose our first seam. I'm just going to remove this off of here so I've got a little bit more room. And the first piece of fabric that we need is the cuff. Now, all the fabrics that we're going to lay out will be laid right side facing up. Well, one thing that we do need to do first of all is actually press this. So the little flange, what we need to do is press this in half. Find the right edge. There we go. So I'm going to press this wrong sides together and give it a nice crease. Now, like always, when we're pressing it, try and press it so that you are pressing it in the orientation that you want it to stay in. Try not to wiggle your iron around, because that will encourage the threads to stretch, and that's how you get a wavy, wavy edge. Also remember, if you want to if you want to crease something, once you've done it, even if you're going to open it up, wait for the fabric to cool down first, because then it's the cooling time that will make the fabric remember the position you want it to be in. So it's the cooling method that makes the crease, basically. Okay. Like so. Just put that out of the way. Right. So now that that's prepared, I can take the cuff and spread it out. And this is why you need it to be quite a decent space. So this fabric is facing right side up, wrong side down to the table. Then you need to take the main body of your pillowcase and open it up so you've got the longest side. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to place that right side up on top of the cuff that we've just put on there. And what I like to do is I'll just put 3 pins in. You can put more if you want to, just to make sure that we're anchoring those together and keep them in position so it doesn't slide. I'm not very tall and I haven't got very long arms, so I can't reach too far across the table. So by doing it this way, I know it's not going to be disturbed. If I was stretching over, I'd keep moving the fabric away. So I've just put those in there. And what I need to do now, I'm just going to move that over a little bit. I'm hoping you can see what I've done. So now I'm going to take the piece that I've already pressed and I'll fold it in half. And I'm just going to place it here. Now, when I place this on, I'm placing the raw edge to the raw edge of the fabric, like so. And again, once I've got that in position, I will just put the pin in there and again at the end. So now I'm going through all 3 layers of fabrics. And I'm just going to pop one in the other end. Now remember, this should fit nicely because we cut them all together. So they all should be the same length. But if they're not, it can be tidied up at the end. It's not a problem. Right. If you prefer to put extra pins in at this point, you can. But due to the time, I'm not going to. So what we need to do now, we need to roll the main body of the pillowcase up. And I'm just going to very gently move that around a little bit. And what we need to do is roll up what I call a sausage. And the staff have been having great fun laughing at me today when I was trying to prepare this. So I'm just going to take the end and just start rolling like so. Don't do the sausage or the folds too big, because what we want to do, we're going to need to enclose this. And you can see once you've got it going, it will just literally roll up like so. Okay, like that. Now, if I just pull this back down a bit, I'm hoping you can see. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to take the bottom end of the flange or the collar, the cuff, and fold it and put it to the edge with all the other pieces, like so, and pin. Now when I pin, I prefer to pin from the edge going in, because when I'm sewing it, I find it easier to pull the pins out. So once I've secured and put in the pin at both ends and the one in the center, then I will pin about every 2 to 2.5 inches all the way along, because we don't want any movement going on there. So I'm not going to do that now. I've already got one prepared. And this is the one I prepared. So I've just left a few pins in here so that you can see how the frequency of how I've pinned it. Once you've pinned all the way along, all you need to do is just do a 1/4 inch seam sewn all the way along this edge. Now, the one little tip I would give you is at the beginning and the end of that row of stitching, I would just either sew the end in, if your machine does that, or just go forwards and backwards a little bit, because we need to pull the pillowcase through. And because of the extra tension you put on it, what we don't want the seam opening up at the end, because the stitches aren't very secure. So just go forwards and backwards 1/2 inch or so, and that's adequate. That's all you need to do. So I've already stitched this, so I'm just going to remove these few pins that I put in just to show you the pinning amounts that I do on there. Okay. So now this is what your pillowcase looks like. So what we're going to do now, we're going to pull this pillowcase through. So all you need to do is take the edge of the inside and just ease it out. It just comes through, no problem at all. Now, the reason you need the cuff to be 9 inches or more is because you've got to pull it through. And if you do it much smaller, it makes it harder to actually pull through. So all you're going to do is just ease this through, like this. There we go. And now you know why I call it a sausage. There we go. Like so. And because I've just done forwards and backwards at the end, I've not got any problems with the edges coming undone. They're all completely still stitched right to the end. So I've pulled that through. And what we have now, this is the inside of the pillowcase. And you can see we have no raw edges. Everything, all the seams are inside the cuff. So if we put this over to the front, you can now see that the piece that I started, which was 3 inches, this is the amount we have going, showing. So this is the little flange that we've got here. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to give this a little press, and then I'll show you how to do the final seams on there. Now when I press, I do like to press it from the back as well, because what I want to do is press any surplus fabric forward, so I get a nice crease on the edge here. So I do press this forward. Again, I'm pressing it from just before the seam to make sure I've got no creases there. If I had more space, I would be using my larger iron, and I would be using a slightly bigger board, but there's not an awful lot of space when I do this one. So I'm just going to give it a nice little press. Also, I would be using best press as well, because I do tend to do that when I want a really nice crisp finish to it. That's something that I do use quite a lot, I must admit. So that's the inside pressed. And just going to put this over. So as you can see, I've done another little Christmas one. And I do make new ones. I have quite a stash of these, and even now, even though my children are grown up, they still actually have their Christmas presents in decorative pillowcases, stockings, and I still do put these on the beds. So it's just a bit of added fun. Okay, so there we go. So I'm all pressed up now. So what we need to do now is we need to do the seams all the way around. Now normally you would probably put your right sides together and stitch around, But what I'm going to do a French seam, because I want these seams all enclosed as well. Because it's going to be something that would be laundered rather a lot, particularly if it's just an ordinary pillowcase from bedding that you'd be using all through the year and not just for Christmas. They get a lot of wear and tear. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to stitch all the way around here very quickly. The one thing that you do need to do is make sure that these sections here join up. We don't want to join them offset, otherwise it won't look very nice when we turn it through. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just judge 1/4 inch in from the edge here, and I'm going to put a pin directly into the seam that I've sewn, like so. I'm then going to put, again, approximately 1/4 inch in. I'm going to put my pin through the other side, and I'll press my pin right the way through so the head of it is sitting on the fabric. Then what I'll do is take my pin and I'm going to put that back into the seam and then out on the seam on the other side. That means then that I haven't got the fabric underneath skewed or moved in any way. So I'll put that one there, and I just want to make sure, and I'm hoping if I hold this here, you can see these two pieces that actually marry up as well. So I just pop a little pin in there. So all I'm going to do now, I'm going to stitch all the way round with a 1/4 inch seam. You don't want to be too generous, because what we will need to do is just trim this back if it's a little bit chunky, because we need to do a French seam and we don't want that to be too heavy. If you wanted to carry on and pin all the way round, that's fine. I don't have time to do that on this tutorial, so I'm just going to actually stitch around very, very quickly. Just move my sewing machine back on. Okay. Whoops. There we go. So again, when I do this, I don't start sewing right from the very edge, because what I don't want is stray threads. So I'm just going to start in, set my foot in about 3/4 inch, like so. So here's the edge of my pillowcase, and I've got the needle about 3/4 inch in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start sewing forwards, and then I'm going to reverse stitch up to the edge. That way you don't get all the stray threads that can look a little bit messy. So I'm just going to stitch down here. Now I'm approaching the pin. So when I sew this piece, I want to sew through literally where the pin has gone into the fabric. So I'll get as close as possible and then pull the needle out, the pin out at a 90-degree angle. Don't twist it. So pull that out there and then carry on and do exactly the same with the second one. And now I'm just going to put the speed on this up, and I'm going to speed all the way down here. So the machine may be a little bit noisy for a minute. These pillowcases make up really, really quickly. Obviously, if you wanted to use this as a Santa sack, you could always customize it by putting someone's name on it. You can always do a applique on it. Even if you haven't got Christmas fabric, you can just use plain fabrics and just put a Christmas applique on it, just in the shapes of Christmas. So I've left the needle down. I'm just turning that around And I'm just going to sew straight away along. And this is why I said when you cut your fabric, make sure you leave enough for 2 seams rather than 1. Now when I get to the edge, I'm going to go towards the edge and I'm going to reverse as well, because what I don't want is a hole at the edge there. Okay, so now I have all the raw edges on the outside of the pillowcase. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to trim the seam allowance off here because I don't want any bulk left on it. So I'm just going to trim it down so it's slightly less than 1/4 inch. Making sure obviously that I don't cut through any stitches at all. Always make sure that obviously when you're trimming that you've not got any corners tucked under, because the last thing in the world we want is for you to slice through something you may have already pieced. That would be a bit of a disaster. Okay, just going up towards the top edge now. Just going to trim a piece off there. Now what we need to do is turn the pillowcase through to the wrong side so we can do our final seam. And I'm hoping that you can see here that by starting off sewing, I move this edge, I started sewing here. So I sewed down and then I reversed up to the top. And by doing that, you can see we've got no spare threads at all, nothing showing, okay? So all I'm going to do now is just turn this inside out. Now, normally I would give this a really good press. Due to the time, I don't have time to do that. I won't be able to fit it in. So I'm just going to ease it over the best I can in the time I have. And use a pin to pull this corner through. Because I do want a nice square corner on there. Just use a pin to ease that through. And this one as well. There we go. I will just very, very quickly press it. It will be very quickly. I would normally spend more time doing this, but I don't want to ruin it completely because of the amount of fabric I've put into it. I'll just give it a nice little press, just on the edge that it needs to be, just making sure that the stitched seam is sitting at the edge there. And I'm just pulling that out with my nails. If I needed to, I could just ease that out with a pin. But it actually is just coming out fine. It's not a problem at all. There we go. And just one final piece here. So when you do this second seam that we're sewing all the way round, if you want to do it 1/4 inch, as long as you've trimmed it back, it's fine. All we need to do is just slightly lengthen, or slightly make the width of the seam a little bit wider. So I'm just very, very quickly going to do that. There we go. Again, I'm not starting right from the very edge. I'm going to raise my needle, push the pillowcase in. I'm down about 1/2 inch, start sewing, reverse, right to the edge, and then on it again. And I'm going to speed all the way down here. Normally I would pin that section as well, but I only have a certain amount of time to do the tutorial in, and I really wanted to show you how to do the French seam because it's really, really neat. Speeding all the way down. Just pivot up the edge, straight down. Just along the bottom edge of the pillowcase now. And again, once I get to the edge, I'm just going to reverse a couple of times just to make sure that we've got no hole there, and we are done. Okay, so I'll just quickly turn this through now, and you will be able to see that we've made a pillowcase in less than half an hour, and all is well. Okay. So this is the pillowcase that we've just made here. Now you saw how I pinned it, and I didn't even pin the last part of it. I pin it accurately the way I showed you. Here's the seam, and I'm hoping that you can see there it's fine. So there we go. So that now just needs a really good press. Pull the corners out with a pin, and push those out like so, and that would be a really nice pillowcase to have on your bed at Christmas, or likewise use as a Christmas sack to put the gifts in for family and friends. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, and goodbye from all the team at the Bramble Patch. Bye bye for now.